I'm trying to get this camera thing down. I've been making some changes, everything, trying to learn how to make this flow happen. So, hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jewel Williams and I am the host of this daily talk show on all things logistics. This will be my new show. This will be my new setup. You will see changes as I get through. But why are you here today? Because I've got 5 strategies to help you get through what is going on in the logistics and transportation industry so that you can maintain your business and maybe even expand your business. So we're going to get into it today. But before we get into it, I want to give you some background on who I am, why I'm here, and why I'm here to help you. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. I want to hear myself. I don't. Let me check my volume. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. And I'm adjust the volume of my background real quick. So bear with me as I get things going. I'm a little rusty. Been going through some things. Got a new business going on. But I want to give you, before I get started, let me give you a little bit of a background as to who I am. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. I appreciate you coming here, taking the time to check out my videos. I am a freight broker now. That's right. I'm a freight broker. I started my own freight broker company. I'm licensed, bonded, and insured. But I'm not here to sell you. I am here to tell you how you can be a better freight, transportation, and logistics person. Why? Here's the background. I started my career in transportation and logistics in the military. My background, I am a U.S. quartermaster veteran. For those of you who are our veterans, high five. Thank you for your service. After I left the United States Army, I went into warehousing. And from warehousing, I learned a lot about how freight comes in from ports, how freight is unloaded, and then how all that turns around and goes back out through a distribution channel as we manage several accounts from shippers who were bringing freight in from China, like shoes and clothes and furniture. And we would turn that stuff around and we would ship it out through containers, whether that be a full container load or whether that be a less than container load. After doing that, I went over to customs brokerage, where I learned how to process freight coming into the ports. Customs brokers are the middleman that work with freight forwarders and other logistics transportation organizations, houses, departments, however you want to phrase it. And with that, I learned how to process paperwork that was coming in for shipments. So I learned how to read invoicing. I learned how to understand what is a bill of lading, what is a manifest. All that stuff was a part of what I learned. Moving forward, I went into working with an importer directly, seeing down to the granular pieces of what does a purchasing or procurement department do, how they send out orders to the manufacturer or another distributor to request that freight to come over, whether it be coming over on a ship, or whether it be coming over on a plane, or whether it be moving in and around the United States. Then I went over and worked with a freight forwarder. Now, freight forwarders, we're going to get into that a little bit more later on, but just a freight forwarder is like a freight broker, yet they have a little bit more hands into the logistics process. And so I got an opportunity to work with a freight forwarder where I learned and managed freight moving intermodally throughout the United States and the world. I would get shipments that came in from Japan, China, Europe, Canada, Mexico, and the whole responsibility was on my shoulders to set that whole link up of transportation and connect all the dots. Moving on and forward, I went and decided to take the leap and dive into the trucking and transportation industry, where I became a truck driver for 15 years. So I started off on the ground just doing day-to-days, and then I moved into trucking as a last piece to the puzzle. And I got a chance to see how does freight get picked up, dispatched, unloaded, dropping hooks, all that stuff. So that's my short piece on how I became a freight broker. What I want to do today is I want to enlighten you to understanding who are the stakeholders, not what are, who are the stakeholders in the transportation business. Because now that we are in a state of flux, many of you are coming into the into this arena, not understanding maybe how does freight flow? Who are the party players in freight? And I want you to stay tuned to the end, because towards the end, I'm going to give you 5 to 6 strategies on how you can get in front of this moving train, in front of this runaway economy, and use this time to build an infrastructure and frame for your freight and transportation business. And if you're a shipper, a manufacturer, or somebody in the logistics field, whether you're working on your own or whether you're working in an organization, this information would be helpful to you as well. So stay tuned to the end. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what I want to start with today is talking to you about who are the stakeholders in the transportation industry. So we begin with starting off with, you've got your shippers. Shippers can be a manufacturer, they can be a distributor. Now, for example, for that would be Tesla, Ford, Boeing. Those would be your manufacturers. They manufacture cars and planes. So then you have your Costco's and your Walmarts. Those individuals are more into the consumer goods and the distribution of what we use every day as consumers. So they buy their stuff from your Campbell Soups and your food producers who make the food, and they just distribute it to us. So those are just examples of who are shippers, manufacturers, and distributors. And all of them either are receiving parts or they are distributing parts. For example, Tesla has to make a car, so they have to pull all of the pieces of the car into their manufacturing facility. And that's going to come from a number of suppliers. Those suppliers are shipping truckloads of parts to Tesla, and then Tesla makes the cars, and then they're shipping truckloads of vehicles back out. And that is in a gist, that's the process. There's a season for that, and we're going to talk about that later on. The next group that I want to talk about in this stakeholders group are your 3PLs, your freight brokers, and your freight forwarders. So a 3PL is a third-party logistics provider. That's what 3PL stands for, third-party logistics provider. An example of a third-party logistics provider is C.H. Robinson. They're one of the biggest. Most 3PLs do not own their assets. And what that means is they don't own the vessel, such as a ocean carrier, a freight liner, or a railroad, or they don't own the trucks. They may own a warehouse or two to control all that goes into the warehouse, all that's happening in the warehouse. But as far as the equipment goes, most 3PLs do not own the actual equipment that moves the freight. Then you have your XPO Logistics, which is also a 3PL, and they do own their trucks and warehousing and buildings and things like that, but they're also considered a 3PL. So you have what's called an asset-based 3PLs. They own all their assets. And then you have a non-asset based 3PL. Now, as a freight broker, you are in the 3PL category. If you're a freight broker, if you're a freight agent, if you're a dispatcher even, you're in the 3PL category. You're on a smaller scale, but you're still there. You don't own your trucks and you don't own any warehousing. You just own your organization. So that's what makes you a 3PL. So when you're on the phone, and I had this situation happen, I had a shipper ask me, was I a asset-based or non-asset-based 3PL? And what that shipper was asking me was, did I own any trucks? And I said no. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what exactly a 3PL was. Now we're moving into the carriers. So you have your shipper. They have what they call tendered the freight, passed the freight, given the freight, however you want to phrase it, to a 3PL, which is a freight forwarder or broker, even an NVOCC. We'll get into that in later videos. So now that you have the freight given from the shipper to the freight forwarder, they're going to pass that over to the carrier. A carrier is an ocean carrier. You've got air freight carriers. You've got truck driving carriers, and you've got rail carriers. Those are your four main transportation models. Freight will move in one of those four areas: air freight, ocean freight, rail freight, truck freight. So carriers work either on a contract rate or spot rate. Now, right now, we are in a situation where spot rates are lower than contract rates. So shippers are at an advantage. It's like when the housing market shifts and you've got your buyer market versus your seller market. When there's a lot of inventory in the housing market, then it's a buyer's market, because the buyers have a lot of options to purchase. They don't have to make that rush decision. When you don't have a lot of housing inventory, meaning you don't have a lot of people selling their homes or the price of the homes are up, then it is a seller's market, because they can basically command more money because the inventory of housing is not there. So this is the same situation. Now that the pandemic has kind of cooled down, inflation rates are up, yet spot rates are down because there's not a lot of movement of freight. Now there's freight out there, don't get me wrong. There's always going to be freight moving. Yet right now, because inventory levels are high, because of companies like Walmart, Target, Costco, they went out and they purchased an excessive amount of inventory. They have increased their inventory levels and they need to get those down. So they've kind of cooled down on how much they're ordering. They're still ordering, they've just cooled it down just a little bit. So until they get to those inventory levels that they have in their records that they like to see, then they will up it. Now there's a few things that can impact or influence an inventory rate. One of them is natural disasters. Natural disasters like Hurricane Ian that just happened is a good example of how inventory levels can go down. Why? Because houses have been destroyed. And I'm not, saying that that's a good thing, but what I am saying is that when a natural disaster hits an area and there is damage to the area, such as housing and where people live, they need to replace their furniture, their bedding, their curtains, all that stuff, their clothes. So what are they going to do? That means they're going to go shopping, and they're going to have to replenish or restore where they were. So a lot of resources are going to go into those areas like Florida, South Carolina, wherever Ian hit the hardest with flooding. Resources are going to start going in that direction. So that takes us into understanding as far as the carriers go. You've got your rail carriers like your CSX and Norfolk Southern. You've got air freight carriers like UPS and FedEx. UPS and FedEx are not just ground carriers where you see them in the little trucks. They actually are also do custom brokerage because they clear freight that comes in from other countries. small partials. A lot of people bring in small partials. And now that you have websites like Alibaba, those companies are shipping partials just like Amazon is shipping. So they're shipping smaller partials, and those partials are getting on planes and going into containers, but they're going in, even though they're going in as a group, they're going to come out as individuals to go to the end consumer, which is you, the person that purchased it. So companies like UPS and FedEx also operate as custom brokers. They operate as carriers, truckloads, and air carriers. Now, you also have your truck carriers. So we got rail, we got air, now we got our truck carriers. We also had ocean, as I mentioned, ocean, OCL, Maersk. Those are your ocean carriers. So your truck carriers, you've got Southeastern, you've got R&L, you've got Old Dominion, XPO is even in there, and then you have your owner operators. Now that first group, Southeastern, Express, R&L, Old Dominion, XPO, those carriers own their trucks. So 9 times out of 10, they don't usually go to brokers, and they make contract rates with shippers. They go in usually every year. As I understand, the season should be coming around March, where contract rates will be renegotiated. So you have your non-contract rates, which is usually your owner operators operate on the spot market. And that's where a lot of fluctuation comes in, because the spot market is dictated by capacity, by freight volumes. All those are two main pieces that dictate the spot rate market. And currently, the spot rate market is at least 20 to 30% below contract rates. So what that means is you've got a lot of shippers out there that are using a spot rate market. Now that sounds great for brokers, but it sounds horrible to truck drivers. And as a former truck driver, I'm here to tell you, you want to get the most money from your transactions, because you have the cost of the fuel, number one. It's not going to stop. You've got to have fuel to move that vehicle. Then you've got the cost of maintenance on that vehicle. You always want to be prepared, because you can get a blowout at any time. And that's not because drivers drive around with cheap tires, but tires get hot, they expand, and they pop. It is just a natural occurrence, and trying to control it and saying that you've got the best tires, you don't. And that's because drivers are driving long distances at long extensive times of the day, and they're going across different types of weather and climates. They could get to be hot down in the south, and they can drive up north in the same day and be in a cooler environment. And all of that is wear and tear on tires and the motor itself. So drivers, owner operators, must cover their maintenance costs. They have put a lot of money into their vehicles, so it's important to get them the best rate. And that's where the challenge comes in, because as the spot rate market has declined, and most shipments are only about $3, some are $2. I've looked at some of them. I don't even want to talk about it. That is what is impacting and influencing truckers at this moment. Freight rates have got to stabilize, or truck drivers are not going to make it. That's the bottom line. And you need your truck drivers. So those are some of the key players, stakeholders. And then you have your sub-agents. You always have somebody in the back office helping these. And three main ones that I want to bring up are your customs brokers, your insurance agents, and then your banking organizations. Those three also are in that mix, because one, truckers got to have the insurance. Freight has to be insured. Freight that comes across the ocean has to be insured. You always want to cover your risk. It is a lot of risk involved in moving freight. As if you've watched the news, you see trucking accidents. You see Amazon right now is going through a situation because of several accidents involving carriers who were pulling their trailers. So insurance is a huge thing, and financing. A lot of these transactions are not paid in cash. They're financed on notes. And so those back office people are key players in the transportation and logistics. So that is the highlights of the stakeholders. And we're going to be digging deep into these individuals. So I wanted to now turn the page, and I want you to think about how to look at all of this. And there's 3 views that I use when I'm looking at the logistics and transportation industry. The first view is a satellite view. That's way up here where I'm looking down, and I can see all the cities, I can see the lights, I can see the mountains. I see that there's movement. That's the satellite view of logistics. And when you're looking at that, you're looking at what is happening overall in this industry. What's the big picture of the industry? A good example of that is right now. The big picture is the industry is in a flux due to inflation, spot rate markets, and shipping volumes between the ports, the rails, and the road being just offbeat. So you want to take that satellite view when you're looking at this. Then once you get that satellite view, now you got to get that bird's eye view. Now you got to put on your wings, and you got to drop your altitude down, and you got to start flying over the terrain and getting a better look at the buildings, the vehicles, the shippers, the manufacturers. What are they doing? How are they moving the freight? You know the freight's moving. Where's it moving to? Where are the lanes at? That's that bird's eye view you want to take. And the last view is that ground view. You're on the ground with the driver. You're on the ground with the warehouse. You're on the ground with the forklift driver. And you're getting in there and you're understanding what is happening with their business so that you can be that consultant as a freight agent, as a freight broker, as a freight forwarder, as just a service provider to that shipper, manufacturer, distributor moving that freight. But you've got all those parties involved. And as the 3PL intermediary, you've got to be in contact and touching each of those parts. So when you're looking at this, you got the satellite, you got your bird's eye, and then you're on the ground with the trucks. So that's my first tip when you're looking at all of this pieces right here. So let's talk about capacity. How is capacity influencing what is happening in the market right now? Capacity, when they're talking about capacity, they're talking about think of it as a container. Okay? Think about how much, if you've got a jar in your hand, the bigger the jar, the more you can fit into it. The bigger the basket, the more you can fit into it. The more data the more memory you have in your phone, the more pictures you can take. So think of capacity like that. And what we're dealing with is warehouse capacity. So if inventory levels are high, that means there's not a lot of space for more stuff to go into the warehouse. And that can cause a problem because forklifts can't move and stuff. Now, most warehouses should have it going up, meaning they should have shelving and things like that. Yet at the same time, you've got what's called first in, first out inventory versus first in, last out. Now, most inventory fluctuates first in, first out. So the first round of goods that come in should be the first round that goes out so that we reduce the amount of spoilage that could happen, or just the style. Something might be out of style. So you want to make sure that when you're doing your inventory turns, you're making sure that you're staying into style. So these are things you want to think about when you're reaching out to your warehousing and just keeping in mind what is going on with that capacity, okay, with the warehousing. Excuse me. Now you want to look at the containers and trailers. Most trailers are 53 feet. It can fit anywhere depending upon the pallet size. Most pallets are 48 by 40. And most shipments I would say stand about no higher than 8 feet. And you really don't want to do that unless you're making sure you're strapping them. Now, there's rolls of paper that International Paper ships. Those rolls are tall. And so, and getting an idea of what capacity is like in a trailer, if you use pallets, you've got 48 by 40, most of them are going to fit anywhere from 26 to 30 or so pallets, depending upon how they put them in and how they turn them. Now, the other containers we're looking at is air freight. You've got only so much weight can fit on a plane, so you got to keep that in mind. And then you've got your ocean vessels capacity. Only so much can, so many containers can fit on a vessel. And then you have your rail cars. Those also are what they're talking about in capacity. So your capacity levels, warehousing, container for trailers and tractors. You've got your air freight, ocean freight, and your rail. Now, of course, everything's got to come off that rail. That rail has to keep moving. That air freight has to keep moving. That ocean vessel has to keep moving. So now you've got your trucking, trailers, and you've got your warehouse. And what a lot of shippers are doing right now is they are bringing those containers off the rail and off the ocean liners, and they're storing them in container yards until they can get that stuff rotated and moved out of their warehouse. So that is what's impacting capacity, trailer availability, how fast your drivers can get unloaded, the whole 9 yards. All of that is a part of the whole. So there's that. Now that view right there you're looking at, that is your ground view, because you're looking at, and actually you're probably fluctuating between your bird's eye view and your ground view, because you're looking at all of the warehouses and storage spaces out here that are holding on to containers because they're using them as storage because they don't want to fill up their warehouses. And as long as they got yard space, they got space for containers. So the current state right now, you've got spot rate under contract rates, meaning your spot rates are lower than what contract rates are. And contract rates only get negotiated, some of them once a year, and some of them even longer than that. You've got fuel prices that are impacting your drivers and what they need to get paid. And then you've got your capacity in the warehouses that is impacting the availability of trailers and how fast your drivers are getting out of those docks. Because sometimes they can't get unloaded because they don't have the capacity to put that stuff. They don't know where to put it. So these are things that are happening that are influencing whether or not you get a load moved, whether or not a shipper reaches out to you, whether or not a shipper does business with you. And in these uncertain times, statistically, shippers don't usually make drastic changes. Businesses don't make drastic changes because they're anticipating what is going to happen and they want to hold their position. It's about survival. So we're coming down to the last few minutes of the show, and I want to thank you. If you've liked anything that I've said today, if the information I'm giving you is valuable, click that subscribe button for me. Hit that like button for me. Share this video to somebody you know who is also looking for answers on helping them grow their business, be a better business, and influence how their customers are being successful. Working with truck drivers, whatever the case may be. If you're in that logistics, transportation, supply chain management field, hit the like button for me. All right, so as I promised, I wanted to give you some strategies on how you can be getting freight business, be strategic about the freight business, and helping your customers as a consultant during this time. Think about that. You're not just about getting rates. You could also be a consultant to your customers. And that would mean charging a consultancy fee. So we're going to get into that later on in the week about how you can shift, still make money, but not just on rates. You may have to shift your mindset from getting commissions off of rates to being a consultant to your shippers and even to your drivers. All right, so let's get into it. So, shipping seasons. Understand that everything has a season, and there are shipping seasons. You've got construction is a season, and that usually lasts between June through November. It's a 6-month season. If you don't believe me, you can Google it. Now, why is that? You would think, well, why not operate in the summer? The soil. In the springtime, there's a lot of rain, and sometimes that soil can't settle. So, they wait till June where that ground is a little bit drier, and then they start building. So, one way that you can keep track of the construction season, pay attention to housing starts. Go around your neighborhood, look at what land is being cleared, because 9 times out of 10, if they're clearing that lot, they're about to build on that lot. Reach out to local companies who do construction, do some research in the construction field, and that is a way to transition. Next, we've got a food season. When I was out in Washington and I worked for freight forwarders, the 2 seasons that we were always tracking were apple season and cherry season, because you can't put apples and cherries on trucks. Well, you can, but you're not going to ship them across the United States because it's 3,000 miles. By the time those apples and cherries got to wherever you wouldn't want to eat them. You wouldn't want to eat them. So they usually ship that stuff by air freight so that it moved faster. So pay attention to your vegetable fruits seasons. Google what's the season for all of this. And if you want to get into produce, which is going to take refrigeration and reefer trailer, so be mindful of that. A reefer trailer is like a moving refrigerator, and they have 2 tanks, one for the reefer, one for the trailer, that need fuel in order for them to run. But food season is another one. And as long as we are human beings on this planet, we are going to eat. So food season, it ain't going nowhere. Automotive production. Pay attention to the times when automotives are being manufactured. Pay attention to these EVs, because you see a shift is coming between gas powered versus electric powered, and things like retail clothing is another season. It's a short season, but if you've got kids, you should know this, because your kids need clothes every school year. Growing children, they're always growing out of something. Those clothes get tossed, new clothes get bought. So there's a clothing season. Pay attention to your port news. You've got a port. You've got Canadian, there's a port. Mexico, across that border, is a port. You've got the Gulf of Mexico is a port. You've got the West Coast ports, and you've got the East Coast ports. Pay attention to your port news. Wherever district that you're in, get into port news. You're going to need that. And pay attention to spot rates and contracts. Be aware, when do contract seasons get negotiated? Be aware of what spot rates are. Understand those things like the back of your hand, because those are your tools for talking to your shippers and being ahead of the game and being proactive. So we're going to be talking about load boards, we're going to be talking about freight volumes, and we're going to be talking about understanding how to think outside of this box as a freight service business that you want to grow. My name is Jewel Williams. I'm a freight broker. Freight Be Moving is my company. I appreciate you watching me, and I hope this information was valuable to you. Like, subscribe, share, and I will see you tomorrow. Same time, different bat channel. Peace.